Thank you again for joining us today. I'm Tam from Utah Division of Program Promotions, DTP, and today we actually are proudly invited the special guest, Mr. Liner from our Utah Center for Foundation Study, the Kampar campus. So he will share with us some of the tips of the English and how to improve your English to prepare for your SPMs. So before that, just let me have a brief introduction of the Mr. Liner's background. So for Mr. Liner, so he is actually graduated from the USM under the Bachelor of Arts, the English Language and obtained the Master of English as a Second Language at the UM. Currently, he serves at the Kampar Campus Center for Foundation Study at the Department of Art and Social Science. He's a quite experienced lecturer, and today definitely will give you good sharings and hope you can get something new for your SPMs. And for your information, the webinar, the recorded versions, we're going to upload to our the Facebook channel and the YouTube channel after the webinar is done, finished. So if you need the revisions, after the webinar, you can check for the recorded versions at our Facebook or the YouTube. And there is a Q&A box and the chat box. So later on, if you have any questions, you can drop it at the Q&A sessions. Mr. Lana will answer respectively. But because of the limited hour we have, maybe we are not able to answer all the questions, just suspected will be answered. Okay, so now we invite Mr. Liner to start for today's webinar. Mr. Liner, it's your turn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tam, our host. Just to check, can you hear me and see me clearly?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Good afternoon once again, Mr. Tam. Also, good afternoon and welcome to all of you participants. It's a Saturday afternoon. It's probably not something that you're very used to doing, attending revision workshops at this time of the day when you probably rather be sleeping, especially after lunch hour like this, right? So I will try to keep it not sleep inducing today. I will try to keep you as engaged and excited as possible. I can only do my best. But to begin with, let me start by sharing my slides. Right, so dear participants, what I'll do is give you a few important reminders before I start so that this can go on smoothly, uninterrupted as well. As I progress through today's session, right, you may have questions, right? So what I want you to do is to drop your questions in the Q&A box. You know, there's a Q&A box that you're looking at right now, an option. There's also another option for chat, which is a chat comment box, right? So specifically for questions, right, that you'd like me to answer, please put them into the Q&A box so that I will be able to pick them from there and then address them later on, right? I'll be doing my best to answer as many questions as possible, but as Mr. Tam pointed out earlier, the time is limited. So I can only promise that I will do my best and it will be done at the end of my session today, right? Okay. Now, let me start off. Yes, sorry, this is the introductory slide. And that is me. Mr. Tam actually introduced me earlier. My name is Lionel. I teach at the Center for Foundation Studies, and my focus area is on communications, writing, using language, basically, for students of various ages, actually, right? I have been teaching for, on average, around 14 to 15 years, right? So currently, I'm based at the Center for Foundation Studies in Utah Kampar, and what I'm here to do today with all of you is to help you feel a little more confident with the small sharing session, which is what I call English Writing Part 1, which is going to run from 2 to around 4 p.m. today. And then I will progress on tomorrow at the same time to English Writing Part 2, right? But for today, what we'll be handling is the English Language SPM paper 1, right? So it's your Bahasa Inggeris Kertas 1, which in total amounts to 1 hour and 45 minutes, right? It's an hour and a 45-minute exam paper. You will read the questions on the question paper, you will answer them on your exam answer sheets, right? As the way it is with all other courses, other subjects, right? Okay. So what I'll be doing today for the roughly 2 hours is to zoom in onto the directed writing, which is actually part of paper 1, but it is section A, right? And we also got section B, which is what we call extended writing or continuous writing. And that is what we'll be going into tomorrow. But for now, for today's 2-hour session, we'll be speaking on directed writing. And just to begin on a little introduction, you probably already know this, but this is an overview to probably refresh your minds, right? It's been a tiring year for you. It's been an unexpected year for a lot of you. And I can only imagine the kinds of feelings you're going through as students, right? With the SPM being pushed back, right? And now it's up to present. We know that it's supposed to be in February. So you've got about 2 months, slightly more than 2 months in preparing, right? And what you're going through, fortunately or unfortunately, is one of the most unique experiences that a Malaysian student would have gone through, right? So with all this that has been going on in through your minds, online learning, staying at home, going to school, staying at home again, it's no surprise that things like writing or language or grammar, English, may seem to fall behind a little bit. Your mind may not be paying full attention to all these things. There's so many things going on in your head at this point, right? So it's my duty right now to run through things very briefly with you. Directed writing, section A of paper 1. Now they say directed because if you look at my slide, the first bullet point, the answer that you provide, right, is guided, right? There are points given in the question that will actually guide you throughout producing your answer. So in the end, when you have the answer to submit to the examiner, the answer you notice would have somehow connected all the points that have been given in the question, right? Now, sometimes there's a picture or what you call a stimuli or a stimulus, right, that is provided. It could be a flow chart. Sometimes you have cartoon characters, excuse me, cartoon characters having a kind of dialogue box, graphics, right? They are there to just add an element of interest, to make it more interesting to look at the paper, right? Sometimes when you look at flowcharts, you may get freaked out and wonder like, how am I going to handle this? Worry not. The flowcharts, the graphics, if they are there for you to see things a little more clearly. And if they are not there, if the graphics are not there, then you'll have points given to you in point form. And we'll have a look at some examples later on in today's sharing. Right, what I can also say is the directed writing question is always based on the kind of situation, right? There's, for example, you're trying to plan a trip, or you've gone for some kind of holiday and you're not satisfied with the service that the tour agent provided, or maybe there's a problem happening at school, and the list goes on. There can be various situations, but the question that you get for your directed writing in SPM this coming February, will be focused on one situation, right? And as I mentioned earlier, there's a guided section or there's a guided part of directed writing, which means points are given, right? Every point given needs to be elaborated by you, right, in your answer. Now, you notice I have highlighted elaboration in red and I put an asterisk there. This is a problematic term, all right? And it's a problematic term which is going to need me to address it later, right? Later on in this sharing session, I will start to zoom in on what it means to elaborate in directed writing, all right? So we're going to zoom in onto that word a little later on. But before that, let's move on. There's very often questions that require you to, yes, use all the points given by the question on the question paper, but very often they ask you to add 1 or 2, sometimes even more points of your own, right? So this is where we're going today. The direction of our 2-hour session, I'm going to start by talking about the time allocation for your SPM English Paper 1, especially for Section A. We're going to talk about the mark allocation as well, right? After that, we're going to spend quite a large part of today's session, going through the types of questions and also a summary of past year questions for Paper 1, SPM English, right? Section A. Then another large section of today's sharing session will be answer guides. We're going to do our best to give you some guides how you can answer questions, how to elaborate them, I mentioned earlier. Unfortunately, it's only a 2-hour session, so I can't do as much as we would love me to handle, right? But I will give you good pointers to work with so you can progress after that on your own, right? And finally, before I let you go today, I'll give you around 12 guidelines or tips as to how you guys can start producing or aim to produce good quality answers in your SPM English Paper 1, Section A. So let's start off with the time allocation, right? Now I mentioned earlier, it's actually going to be an hour and 45 minutes, right? An hour and 45 minutes paper split into 2 parts. You've got your long essay that is going to probably take up an hour of your writing time, of your exam time, right? But this is what we are going to be focusing on tomorrow afternoon. Today, we'll be actually looking at this section. This is our area of interest today. For the directed writing, you have 45 minutes to work out your entire answer. 45 minutes to actually earn the marks that you think you deserve. So once again, directed writing is today's focus. Paper 1, Bahasa Inggris, Section A. Right. Now I'm going to break down my recommendation, how you guys should spend your time in the directed writing. You have a total of 45 minutes. You're going to get a question that involves not just answer the following question. How do you feel about a certain issue? Question mark. It is not going to be as general or vague as that. It is actually going to be very helpful. As I said, you'll be guided. There'll be points listed for you. Sometimes 5 points, sometimes 6 points, most often 10 to 12 points. So we'll talk about handling the points later. But for now, as soon as you get that question paper and you're allowed to open it, read Section A. Understand the question. Don't just read it. You guys need to see what the question is asking. Understand the question. Also, there are going to be points given. Understand those points. Chances are very high that all the points listed will not be presented to you in very tough or difficult English. The points are going to be straightforward and simple enough for you to understand. So I wouldn't worry about, am I going to get lost? Is a point going to be so difficult for me to see what it is and I can't refer to a dictionary? Relax. It doesn't happen. You look through SPM past year papers, you realize 7 minutes that I recommend is actually enough to run through the question, understand it, and run through the points as well. Then, this is what we call planning your answer. I'd like you to take a pencil or pen on the question paper itself, start mapping out the elaboration on each point, right? Points will be given to you on the question paper, but unfortunately, the elaborations will not be given. And fortunately, I'm here today to tell you how we can elaborate, right? So once you look at the question paper and you understand the points, directly next to each point, right, put down in your pencil or in your pen short keywords that will help you to elaborate. So for example, if there are 10 points, you're going to have 10 little elaborations. All right? Okay. Now, that is going to take probably around 8 minutes, give or take. Now, the major portion of your time is going to be spent on actually writing. Okay, so you write out your complete answer in, I'm hoping, around 25 minutes, right? And you've got the last 5 minutes to check for mistakes. Now, if you found mistakes in your answers, erase the answer very neatly, right? And after that, correct the answer also very clearly so that the examiner is not confused between how you have cancelled out the answer and how the new answer is written out, right? So don't be afraid to make corrections because that's what checking is for. So in total, you should not spend more than 45 minutes on section A. The rest of the hour is going to be spent on long writing, continuous writing. Marks, right? You often look at online sources, all right? And you notice that they will break the mark allocation down into 3 parts. Very often you'll see that they give you 3 marks for format and 12 marks for content. And the content here actually refers to points. The format here refers to layout, right? So let's just have a look at this format, 3 marks, excuse me, usually given for the opening, when how you put your address if it's a formal letter, how you put your address if it's an informal letter, the closing, the signature, the yours sincerely, who are you writing to, who is it from, right? Now the format is a very small component. It amounts to 3 marks. More on that in a few minutes, right? The content, on the other hand, is a really large component and that amounts to 12 marks. This requires you to list all the points or to include all the points that have been given on the question paper, as I mentioned earlier, together with the elaboration that you planned out by writing with pencil earlier. So the points plus your elaboration put together side by side will actually, if done properly, help you to earn your 12 marks. Now, I'm going to elaborate a little more on this, right? There's something special to talk about here. Although it's usually the case, guys, 3 marks for format, 12 marks for content. When you look at your exam paper, you'll notice that the way they present it is so what you actually look at is not as clear-cut as what I'm showing you on this PowerPoint slide. And I want you to take note of this. They say that there'll be up to 15 marks given for content and format. Now, this is something you have to be aware of as to how it applies to y'all. Most of the time, there's a 3-mark allocation for format, but there are certain kinds of directed writing which the format is very, very minimal. For example, if you're writing a speech or a talk, right? There's a very small part for format. All the format involves is good afternoon to the senior assistant, to teachers, and then at the end, thank you for lending me your ears. And that's basically the format for a speech. So clearly, that's not going to amount to 3 marks. Whereas if you look at a formal letter, right, you have the address of the sender, the address of the receiver, the line, the date, the dear part, the yours sincerely part. That can amount to 3 marks because there's quite a lot of different format elements, right? So what I want you to take note of is try not to worry so much about how many marks they're going to give me for format, right? At most, it's only 3. And if at some point you get a question, for example, a speech, where they can only somehow find 2 marks to give you for format because there's nothing more in format, then you realize the rest of the marks are going to come from your content. So it can actually be working out to 13 marks for content. And in cases like this, it may depend on you elaborating a little more to earn the 13 marks, or the question giving you a little more points for you to include in your answer to earn the 13 marks, right? So once again, although most of the time this is the case for the marking criteria, in general, it's safer to remember that it's going to be 15 marks for your content and for your format. Now, everybody's favorite part, language. Least favorite part, I don't know. Now, this is a very heavy component. You have 20 marks to earn by using your tenses correctly, your vocabulary, your connectors, right? Your therefore, furthermore, besides, yeah? How you spell your words, your punctuation, your commas, your full stops, right? Your hyphens, and then also your sentences, the structure, and how you combine words together. That's called collocation, right? Okay, mark allocation done. Time allocation also done. The kinds of questions you'll be facing in your SPM are broken down into 5 types. All right, you have article writing, which has come out most recently in 2019. It also came out in 2014. A report is another common question that's asked. 2018 was the recent one. Just the year before was the other time the report came out. Then you have speeches or talks. Now, the questions can sometimes use the word prepare a speech. Sometimes the questions say prepare a talk. They function very, very similarly. I wouldn't worry about the difference between them, right? So prepare for them in the same way. They came out in 2011, 15, and 16. Quite common, yeah, if you look. Informal letter, a letter to a friend or a sister or brother, came out in 2010, 2012, and then 2013 as well. Formal letters, if you look, came out in 2013, but there's a 10-year gap, guys, between 2013 and the time it came out before that. It was 2003, and then nothing until 2013. So what you're looking at on the slide is the 5 types of questions or the 5 possibilities of directed writing questions, right? Now, I'm going to go through a quick run through of past year questions, right? For your SPM paper 1 section A. Okay. You're looking at the most recent 6 years. Guys, 2019, as I showed you earlier in the summary, an article was asked. What did they want you to do? It's an article where you're supposed to write about a Go Green Day project that was organized in your school. How many points did the question give? You know, I told you on the question paper, there will be points given, right? Guided. You got to use the points. The question in 2019 gave 12 points, and it required the students to use all 12 points, right? 2018, a report was asked, and you were supposed to report to a teacher advisor about these international students coming over to your school for a special visit. You participated in it, and you're supposed to report to the teacher advisor. The year before that, report again, but this time was a report to the principal of the school. And you're supposed to suggest how you can solve the problem of students coming late for school. There were only 11 points in this case. And you notice that sometimes when questions give you less than 12 points, they will require you to add points of your own. The question will state, add in 1 point of your own, add in 2 points of your own, or add in points of your own wherever necessary, right? 2016, going back 1 year, there was a talk, a speech to classmates recommending the trick that you want them to choose. There were 2 options given, but you're supposed to compare and contrast. 2015, there was a speech again. This was farewell to your favorite English teacher, right? And 2014, there was an article, right? So article was 2014 and 2019 again, right? Last year's SPM was an article. And what was it about in 14? It was about ways of keeping the neighborhood safe. It's keeping the neighborhood crime-free, okay? An article in a school magazine. This one gave you only 10 points. 10 points listed in the question, which means the students were asked to develop another 2 points of their own. Right, guys, let's go a little further back. Okay. You often get questions in your mind. What kind of questions do they ask in SPM? How do the directed writing questions look like? So I'm actually doing my best to give you an overview, right? So I showed you earlier until 2014, right? Now I'm going way back, time when you guys were really, really small, young. 2001, all the way until 2008, you can have a look. Articles came out twice. Talks came out twice. There was 1 formal letter in 2003, as I mentioned earlier. 2 informal letters came out consecutively, 2005 and 2006. And then in 2004, there was a report. And what the questions wanted were they're all presented on the right side of the table here. Okay, so the article asked you to cope with stress, how you suggest people deal with their stress. The talk was about how to achieve safety on the road. Formal letter, you're supposed to choose a class trip at the end of the year and provide reasons why you want them to choose this, right? The report was on how things in school can be improved. The informal letter was about an outdoor camp. You're supposed to talk about the experience. Another informal letter was about encouraging your friend why you want her to become the head prefect. She's not sure if she should or she should not. You're encouraging her to do it, giving her your reasons. Yeah. And then 2007, there was a talk about a reference book that is very good for secondary students. And finally, 2008, an article describing your friend. Okay. 2009, there was a report again explaining to the principal why there is very low interest in sports among students and how you can actually increase their interest. The next year, there was an informal letter again. Notice they're actually quite common, yeah, informal letters, telling your cousin the benefits of national service, the program, right? This is way back, okay, when national service was a very hot topic. Then in 11, there was a speech to the Red Crescent Society about how to take care of an injury, followed by another informal letter, how to spend money wisely. And then in 2013, the only other formal letter came out, writing to complain about a recreational park, a playground that's not kept in good condition. You're writing to the Majlis Bandaraya, to the town council. And in 2014, there's an article in the school magazine about how to keep their neighborhood safety, how to keep their neighborhood safe, right? All right. I'm going to zoom into some examples, right, to have a look at what the questions look like. Now, I showed you lots of summarized versions. I want to look at a detailed question now. Let's look at 2016, SPM Paper 1, Section A. The question is talking about students arriving late at school. So I give you a moment. You guys read this. Take maybe a minute. Take a minute or two. Go through this whole slide. It is not necessary for you to panic when you look at the word survey. Do not freak out because you're not going to have to conduct a survey. You're not even going to have to explain the survey too much. All they need is, and you should, when you're actually looking at the question, circle this because this is what they want. They want a report. But what do they want inside the report? As I said, the good news for all of you is Section A, Paper 1 gives you all these points that you can use, right? And this allows your, just give me a second, my pen went singing a bit, huh? All right. So all these points are given from the top to the bottom. And if you look, they start off with, okay, a little bit about the survey. This actually, according to this question, right, you conducted a survey to find out why your peers in school, yeah, why they come late to school, right? So the question gives you 4 specific details about the survey. So that means this is point 1, 2, 3, and it goes on. And then later on, when you come down, you go to 5, 6, 7, 8, okay, 9, 10, 11, 12. So guys, if you look at this, there are 12 points given. And this 12 points would hopefully translate into 12 marks, right? For content, remember just now? But unfortunately, it's not as simple as that. You don't just get the marks by stating the point. You get the marks by also adding the elaboration, which we're supposed to discuss later. So if you look at all these 12 points, and you do what I was asking you to do earlier, right? Make very short notes by the side of the points. Then basically you ensure that you understand everything and you ensure that you're able to elaborate. Now let's look at the rest of the question. It tells you, obviously, you're being reminded, yeah, you just need to write a report. Remember that there's a format to follow. The format is you're writing to a receiver. This receiver is your principal. Your report needs a title. And you need to provide your name as the writer. The question is really trying to remind you of the format. You know, people say that questions freak them out, questions are cruel. I'll say that questions can sometimes be really kind. It's actually specifying the format for you. And this gives you your chance to earn your 3 marks already. All right. Now, remember that this question also wants you to develop all points given. Now guys, developing means yes, you have to write down the point, list down each point, plus developing also includes elaborating on the point. And when the question says give your own ideas when needed, this will actually be used as your elaboration. Right? That's what happened in 2016 for the SPM paper 1. Right? Let's try something more recent, guys. 2019, last year. Remember we said that it's an article, right? The article is about a school project called Go Green Day. It's like a campaign, right? And the points are given as well. Now, it's actually a lot of space taken up, so I'm going to show you. This is the first part, and then the next slide will actually go on into the second part. Yeah. So if you look, they want you to talk about where the campaign was conducted, what date, what time, who was the organizer, and who are the people who participated. The group, the students, the teachers, right? And the topics, they don't want you to develop your own topics. They give you the topics, guys. Protecting animals, plants, rubbish, how you handle them, right? And moving on, the list of points continues. Talks by the expert, making a garden, all these recycling. And see, this is what we were talking about earlier. They specifically ask you for one more activity of your own, right? And then they continue giving you the concluding points. So the question wants you to use the appropriate format. That means the article needs to have a title, and you need to have the article written by whom? By you, the writer of the article, right? And then after that, you've got to develop all the points. And as I mentioned earlier, developing means elaborating as well. And elaborating involves your own ideas. All right, guys, you've looked at 2 examples of past year questions. One was very recent, just last year, which is an article. And then the other one was in 2016, which was a report. Okay, right. Just give me a second. Move on. All right. Now, we're going to try guiding you on answering techniques, okay, for your SPM Paper 1 Section A. Now, this is where I'm going to speak quite a lot on how to elaborate effectively, as well as other guidelines. Right. I'm noticing some questions in the Q&A box. Thank you very much. I will be addressing them later, okay, towards the end. Okay, I'm looking at them. I see them as they emerge, but I will address them later, right? Okay, now let's move on to this one. I think this is why we're all here, right? We need a guide on how to answer. And I'm going to handle that red asterisk we were dealing with earlier, right? Elaboration. Okay? You're going to expand. You're going to elaborate on every single point given in the question. I can guarantee you, if you miss the elaboration, if you do not elaborate, like guys, remember just now, you look at papers like this, right? Okay, like talk by expert, making a garden, recycling. If you're just going to put them down, for example, okay, you're just going to say, there was a talk conducted by an expert. The talk was about making a garden. And then we needed to learn how to do recycling. Now that is fine. You are listing the points given in the question. But guys, you're lacking in elaboration, which means the point that's given in the question is merely being placed back on the answer sheet by you, almost like a computer or a typewriter would do it, you know. You're not functioning as a student who needs to, yes, list down the point, but directly after the point, you got to elaborate as well, right? So this here tells you every single point you need to elaborate. You write the point alone from the question, even if you write it in perfect grammar with a nice full stop at the end, you're going to be lacking in content marks, right? Now the question is, yeah, it's very easy for Mr. Lino to say elaborate, elaborate. How? And this is where a lot of students have spoken to me personally saying, sir, I just start to panic when I have to elaborate. I scratch my head, there's no answer coming. I get, I get nervous and nothing's coming to my mind. Yeah, okay, the basic question, elaborate how, do what? All right, guys, you need to remember that all of you are actually capable of recalling your own world experience. What do I mean by world experience? You have been reading stuff, right? Fine if you don't read the traditional newspapers, but you probably read things on the internet. You probably look at things on people's social media sharings. You probably check people's Instagram stories. People have shared Snapchat information with you, and very often, fine. Sometimes you have funny memes or you have gags, right? But very often there are news items inside. Even if it's presented in a kind of funny way, it actually is based on reality, right? Now, this is what I mean by world knowledge. You actually have a lot of knowledge built up in your mind, and it's not the memorize the knowledge by looking at textbooks time. It's the knowledge that you have gathered as you move from one day to another day, and not just your social media, not just looking at newspapers or watching TV. When you speak to people, you go to places, and you are in different situations. For example, I don't know, maybe one day you went to a clinic, and the doctor decided that um, you need to get admitted for one night because the doctor needs to run some checks. And it was a total surprise for you because you thought it's just going to be a normal routine checkup, 5 minutes, go home. But the doctor says, no, we need to probably look at something else. So you faced a situation that was very interesting, not just for you, but for anybody who listens to it or who reads about it when you write. And places as well. You've gone to some, forest reserve for a trip with your family, or your friends and you decided to spend your time after PT3 last time. You decided to spend your time, at some gotong royong project or helping out in an old folks retirement home. Yeah, those are places you dealt with people. Keep those ideas in your mind. They will be useful in your elaborations, as well as your own emotions. What are you afraid of? What are the problems you face? And in your mind, logical predictions. Like, okay, for example, let's talk about the pandemic right now, COVID. Nobody knows what's going to really happen, but you and I have certain anticipations, in our head. We have certain guesses. We can kind of guess that, yeah, I think this is gonna happen. I think this might happen. I think that the CMCO period will be shortened. I think maybe it'll be lengthened. These are just examples of things that run through your mind. They're hypothetical situations, guys. Don't worry about the difficult word. Really, it just means that there are things in your mind that provide possibilities of what can happen in the future. And it may come true, it may not, but it's based on your life experience, it's based on your logic, right? So all of these are actually parts that are very valuable when you elaborate. Now, again, not everything is going to be used in the same question. For example, if you went to the clinic just now and then you had to stay in a hospital for one night, right? But the question is actually about how you help some victims of a flood. There was a very heavy downpour, and there were flood victims in your neighborhood, and you helped the victims. Now, obviously, the question is not about you in a hospital. You don't have to go and write about yourself being stuck in a hospital ward. But in that episode of you in a hospital, you may have experienced a feeling of being helpless. You may have experienced a feeling of being uncertain about what's going to happen. Am I going to get out of here soon or what? And that's the kind of thing you can transfer onto the situation where you're trying to describe how people feel when they're facing a flood. Do you get what I mean, right? So that's just an example how your own experiences can be used. Right, the next part, I want you to do your XXX, okay? Your XXX key towards elaborating. When you elaborate, first and foremost, and by the way, not necessarily all, okay? You don't necessarily have to use all, even one will do. Explain maybe a reason why something happened, right? Or you could expand. Now, an expansion, basically, when you expand, it means that you're not explaining why it happened, but you're talking about maybe something that will happen in the future because this happened. Remember just now, there's the question about students arriving late for school. All right, so there's a point that says their alarm clocks do not ring. They switch off their alarm clocks and they go back to sleep. Now, that's the point that's given in the question. Now, think about it, guys. Your own expansion. You can say that students in the survey, 50% of students claim that when their alarm clocks ring, they switch it off and fall asleep again. Full stop. Now, that's not the elaboration. The elaboration comes next, like this. If this practice continues, it will not only affect their attendance at school, but can also cause them to be poor attendees at their future job or future workplace. Now, that is you talking about the future effect. Is an expansion of them switching off their alarm clock and ignoring it, right? Or worst come to worst, just provide an example. So similar situation, 50% of students in the survey claim that they switched off their alarm clocks and fell back to sleep. That's why they were late from school. That's why they were late for school. For example, after a football match, after the final football match of the World Cup that was held recently, students went to sleep no earlier than 3 a.m. And when the alarm clock rang, they were just too sleepy and it caused them to switch it off, right? So there's a bit of an example of the football match as well as a reason why they switched it off, right? So sometimes these can be very helpful. Explain, give reasons, expand, provide effects, and give examples. Okay, I hope that you're all fine and still with me. Okay, we're going to go on now into formats, right? You can see formats bracket 5 there. I'm going to go into the formats that you have for the 5 different directed writing questions, right? So I'm going to go off these slides and I'm going to open some Microsoft Word sheets for you, all right? So glance through my first one. Okay. We're now looking at the format for a report, right? Just give me a second to let me get this running. Right, once again, I am seeing your questions. I'm very happy that you feel comfortable enough to ask these questions. I will address them later, right? Rest assured. Okay, let's go through the formats briefly now, guys. These formats, you can find them online. There are tons of resources to get these formats. I'm sure you use your SPM revision books, you have seen these formats as well. But it's my duty as the one who is running our sharing session today, just to remind you of these formats, right? So when you're preparing a report, okay, do me a favor and ignore all these Microsoft Word error messages here, yeah? Okay, so just ignore all that. Just look at what I prepared here for you. If you're preparing a report, right on the top, on the left side, you need to actually put down to the name of the person. Directly underneath that will be the principal or the teacher in charge or whatever is the position of the reader of your report, right? Okay, and then you move on into the school that you're at. Most of the time, your reports that have been asked in past year questions, right, throughout all those years I showed you, right, there are always reports that have been written for people in school, like teacher advisor, principal, discipline master, right, those kind of things. So yeah, you do all of this as your format on the left side, right at the top of the report. Directly underneath that, you need to write the title of the report and capitalize the content words only. What do I mean by that? What do I mean by content words? Okay, content words, capitalizing them will be, just give me a sec, yeah. All right, here. Just give you an example of how content words can be used. And sorry, how titles can be written. So this is the report. Right, now guys, content words are the words that carry meaning, the words that bring meaning into your title or into your sentence. So the content word here is report. I need to capitalize the R. The content word is discipline. I need to capitalize the B. I need to capitalize the I for issues. A non-content word is what we call a function word. This is just a preposition. Words like on, words like at, and, with, right? Now, these are words that just link ideas together. They provide a certain function, right? So those words are not capitalized, right? So your title of a report example will be the one I've written for you here. Report on discipline issues in school, for example, right? Okay, guys, you move on to the first paragraph, and this is what we call the introduction, or I use the word opening. What to do? In the introduction, you need to state the situation. Now, remember I told you every question has a situation? State the situation clearly in the report, right at the beginning. Maybe it's not maybe a situation is a problem. Maybe it's a good thing. Maybe it's a risk. Whatever it is, state it. And then directly after that, you need to say why you are writing this report. Okay, right? So an example will be, right, guys, I have stated the situation. Students have been attending school lessons late recently. Full stop. Okay? You're writing a report. So this report presents reasons why this phenomenon is taking place and suggestions how to improve the situation. So of course it depends on the question, yeah. Like maybe the question asks you to present reasons. And then you know when you look at all the points given in the question, there are like 6 or 7 reasons. Then later the question provides another 5 suggestions. So you know what you're doing, but you have to state it in the introduction, in the opening, right? All right, then you move on to the second paragraph, the third paragraph, the fourth paragraph. Now they are all very similar. List down the points, write the points in complete sentence, and directly after that, elaborate on that point. Then the second point, elaborate on it. That third point, and elaborate on it. Now, this is going to make sure that you don't forget to elaborate anything. Sometimes we think that we can just write down point 1, point 2, point 3, and then directly after that, elaborate on everything, and the elaboration will be really long. Now, you got to think of the examiner as well. The examiner is going to have a hard time finding which elaboration belongs to which point. You don't want that to happen. You want it to be well organized. All right? So elaborate directly after mentioning the point, elaborate. Then the second point, elaborate. Then the third point. And in each paragraph, you've got to make sure you use all your connectors wisely. Right? You've got many connectors, I'm sure, right, that you've looked at. I'm just writing very, very few. Yeah, these can go very well into the paragraph to separate one point from another point. Okay, then the third paragraph, you provide the next 3 points and the elaboration. So essentially, right, guys, I'm hoping you can squeeze 3 points into each paragraph. And the fifth paragraph, you have the 10th, 11th, and 12th point. In total, you're always aiming for 12, by the way. So even if the question gives you 10 or 9, you got to come up with your own to reach 12. All right, the last paragraph, the closing, most of us just call it the conclusion, right? The closing paragraph, just briefly make a summary of the report. Very briefly. It's not the summary like you're doing in your comprehension reading passage. It's totally not like that. This is like a 1-line or 2-line summary. And then, if it's a problem, especially since like students are coming late, you have presented some suggestions, right? Maybe you can put in a couple more suggestions for the future. or you can actually talk about what the parents can do or other people can do or the media, but do not elaborate on this. Just list them down very briefly. The closings, right, should be kept short. Don't worry about writing a long conclusion. At the bottom of a report, you have to use this format. Reported by with a comma. You sign here, your full name here. If you have a position, you put it down. If you have a club or society, you put it down. All right? Okay. That is for a report. Right? Now let's move on. I'm going to move on into, just give me a second, yeah. All right, yeah. Okay. Hold on a second, yeah. All right. Just to check, Mr. Tam, you can see this, right?
We're looking at your file explorer, Mr. Lido.
Oh, right. Okay, hang on. Yeah, just give me a sec. Okay, it's fine now?
Yes, it is.
Okay,
it's
thanks
on
a
the
lot.
Word version.
Right. Sorry about that, right? I will continue now with a formal letter. Moving on from report to a formal letter. You've got a very specific format for the formal letter. Probably the most complicated format is involved here, right? So remember that there's a left side address for you, which is your address, the writer's address. Now, it doesn't have to be your home address. It can even be your school address, right? Don't forget to put the commas. Then you've got a line across directly after your address. And then the person who's going to receive the letter, their address will be next. And don't forget, the last line of that address, which is usually the state, like Selangor or Sarawak, right? It corresponds on the right side. At the other extreme, you will have to write the date. And the date will be written in capital letters. So 27 November 2020, you would capitalize the November month. And once again, the date will be corresponding to the last line of the address. Right? Okay. So it's this. Then you move on to the salutation. You address them by dear sir or dear madam. Right? Title of the letter, again, I don't need to repeat, yeah, capitalizing the content word, but you've got to make sure you underline the formal letter title. And then moving on, again, the introduction. Very similar to what we did with the report. We need to state our intention. What are we writing for? Here, I'm writing to complain about an issue or writing to ask for permission to make a documentary, for example. This must be done in your first paragraph. Okay? And do recall and do try to remember as well, in your writing, yeah, for formal letter, the first paragraph is not numbered, right? Yeah, the first paragraph actually contains no number here, right? No numbering. But the second paragraph onwards, you will actually start to put the number. This is applicable only for formal letters, right? For some reason, formal letters require a numbering, and then you continue your paragraph like that. So the second paragraph, you will do what I said earlier as well. You bring in the first 3 points. Remember, the point will be presented in a complete sentence, immediately followed by the elaboration. Usually, you have to use a connector then point again, followed by an elaboration once more, connector again, followed by the last point, which is the third point, and the elaboration. So that's how you present 3 points in one paragraph. Someone has asked me a really good question. How long should the elaborations be? Like one sentence or two sentences or what, right? I will talk about that in a while. The third paragraph, do the same thing. Points 4, 5, 6. Fourth paragraph, the next 3 points. The fifth paragraph, the last 3 points. And finally, again, the sixth paragraph will contain a short summary, and you tell the reader what you're expecting. You expect, like, for example, if you've made a complaint, you're going to expect them to take steps towards solving the problem. Or if you've written a letter asking your headmaster for permission to make a documentary at school, right? Then in this component, in this last part, right, conclusion, you're going to state that you're hoping to hear from the headmaster soon to see whether the permission is granted or not. And your formal letters will end with faithfully. Please remember this. Signature, your name, and your position, if you've got a position. Right? Okay. Now, let's move on. We will look at informal letters in a bit. All right. Now, it's actually quite the contrast to formal letters that you've written. You don't need to provide so much of format for this one. It's definitely not as complicated. You have your address on the right side this time. Please be very cautious about this, yeah? Don't get them mixed up, please. The address for informal letter is always on the extreme right side, not on the left. That's for formal letters. And the address is your own address, the writer's address. After that, you write down the date. Okay? And then you only come back to the left side when you're addressing them by dear Jane, right? Okay? So once you've got the name written there, you then provide your opening paragraph. Right? Now, in your informal letters, there is no numbering for the paragraphs. Just present your paragraphs the same way you always do, right? Normal paragraphing. So the first paragraph, usually what you do is you remind the reader, for example, if she's your sister or something, remind her about a previous letter that you read or a previous way that you contacted each other. Like maybe she sent you a Facebook video call request and you answered, so you actually engage in a video call. Then maybe you don't have to talk about a letter, but you talk about the Facebook chat that you have, a Facebook call that you have. Or even if there's no contact that you had recently, but maybe something just reminded you of her. You know, maybe you're walking into the museum and then you actually saw an art piece there that you knew she would love, and then your mind started to think about her. And that's what's making you want to write a letter to her. Right? So it's also good to be pleasant in the introduction. Ask after the reader and ask after the family as well. Right? So also maybe school, or if she's working, then ask about work. Right? It's totally fine to ask questions in an informal letter, because informal letters can be friendly, can be conversational. So it's totally okay to have a question like this. And then you just put a question mark like that, right? It's fine. She will likely answer it when she replies to the letter. Now, the second paragraph, the third paragraph, the fourth paragraph, the fifth paragraph, they have similar pattern of points presentation. Once again, don't forget, even for an informal letter, the points will be given in the question. So you're going to present the first 3 points in this paragraph. Again, make sure the connectors are used wisely and elaborate by using your own opinions, your own experiences. But the thing about informal letters that's different from all the other kind of writing, report, formal letter, article, you're going to do it in a friendly tone. You don't have to be so formal, right? You can say things that sound a little more friendly, a little more conversational, right? So that's what happens with the other paragraphs, right? I believe I can move on, yeah? Okay. So when you come to the sixth paragraph, right? The sixth paragraph, this is the, forgot to write the word sixth here. This is the closing paragraph. you say something positive, even if the letter is about something negative or some kind of problem that your cousin is going through, for example, end on a positive note. Do not make it sound pessimistic. So wish the person good luck, for example, wish that the person recovers, or say that you're looking forward to hearing from her again, right? And in the end, how you sign off, you have a few options. If you're writing to a friend, then perhaps your friend, or this, if she's your sister or cousin. If not, probably the most general one will be yours sincerely. Okay, and finally, you can write down your name or your signature at the bottom, right? Okay, I'm going to move on. Right now, we've covered 3 formats already. We've got one more now, which is the article format. The title of the article goes right on the top of the page. Again, underline it, capitalize the content words only. Okay, the first paragraph of the article, once again, articles do not have numbers in their paragraphs, not like formal letters. First paragraph, you produce the introduction. You talk about the situation, talk about the event, and also state your purpose. Very similar to how I helped you out earlier with the formal letter opening, right? Now, again, second, third, fourth, and fifth paragraphs will be all your content points with their elaborations. And the connectors, make sure you use them wisely. The sixth paragraph will be the closing, the conclusion. Again, very briefly summarize and talk about the future. Is there something you hope will happen in the future? Or if it's an experience that you had, for example, you hosted international students at your school and you had an international student week. So what did you gain from the experience? Make it short, don't elaborate, right? Then, since you're writing an article, yeah, you need to actually provide your name. Now, some of the older article formats, if you look, they actually have a name underneath here. That means after the title, you actually provide a by. Okay, now what we're doing now is we've moved on to a newer format where the name is actually placed at the bottom. Okay, so just give me a second. Contributed by with a colon, you put down your full name and you put down your position, if you have a position, right? Okay, one last format for me to go through and then we are back to our slides. Sorry about that, interruptions of daily life. Okay, we're talking about the last format at this point, and it's a speech/talk. They function very similarly in their structure, right? And if a question asks for a speech or for a talk, you would actually construct them the same way. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this is one of the directed writing styles that has very minimal format. There's practically no addressing or dates or anything like that. So all you do is really write it like a regular essay. You start with the first paragraph, but what's important is you've got to have a greeting to all attendees. And usually you start greeting in order of who is most senior in the crowd. Like sometimes it's the director of the company or the headmaster of the school or the principal, right? And you go down from the principal to the senior assistant and then teachers and then friends, right? So that is if you're talking about a speech in school assembly, for example. Also, in the introduction, briefly thank them for the opportunity. Now, a lot of books don't tell you to do this, but it's important to do it at the start of a speech. Thank them for the opportunity of allowing you to address a certain topic, to bring your thoughts to the audience, right? And also, finally, in the introduction, same paragraph, state the purpose of your speech, why you're there, or the purpose of your talk. Okay. Now, again, second, third, fourth, fifth, they all function the same way. You put your points in and you elaborate them. Where do the points come from? They come from the question paper Where do the elaborations come from? They come from your world experience, right? Sixth paragraph is the closing. All you have to do, and usually for a speech, the closing is really short, kind of like the report as well. Thank the audience once more for their time and attention. Some of you use the very often used phrase, thank you for lending me your ears, right? That's fine if you remember that phrase. Otherwise, just make it simple. Thank you for your time and attention. Thank you for attending my talk, right? It will be enough as well. And just before you thank them, of course, once again, you need to summarize the topic very briefly. Okay, so what you've got right now is 5 different formats that I've run through. Okay, now we're going back into our slides. Minute. Okay, yes. Right, so I've run through those 5 formats with you. Right, I hope it's actually helped to jog your memory a little bit. Now let's go into the nitty-gritty. Let's get into some tough detail. Okay, I'm going to show you 5 examples of how we can elaborate. The first one we're looking at is a report. Okay. This report is actually to the principal of Sekolah Menengah Kebangsaan Desa Fajar, right? Okay, so her name is Miss Geraldine, Mrs. Geraldine Keong. So you put her name there, you put the principal. In this case, principal of Sekolah Menengah Kebangsaan Desa Fajar can be written like that, or another way of writing it would be, if you don't want to put it that way, you can just put Sekolah Menengah Desa Fajar down here. Right? And you don't have to use the of there. Okay, then it's the title of the report that you've got here. And you may be wondering how to present an opening, right? I spoke a lot about introductions earlier. So how does an introduction actually look? I'm writing to bring to your attention the dissatisfactory conditions of the services provided in our school library. So that you actually see that the question is about how the school library isn't living up to its expectation. Then immediately, this is a serious matter and it should be addressed as soon as possible. Notice the introduction is short and straightforward. Okay, what I've done here is, in this report, I've kind of screenshotted, I've written it for you, but I screenshotted my first paragraph only. First paragraph was the introduction. The next one is the paragraph 2, which has my first content point, second content point, and third content point. What I've done is created an elaboration for each one. The content point is the one that's been underlined. These are the ones that are provided on the question sheet. And then after that, you actually have the elaboration that is your own. So for those of you asking me whether the elaboration should be 1 sentence only, 1 sentence is actually enough for an elaboration. 1 simple sentence. So here the content point is, librarians are very rude. Then you continue with the example notice. What's happening here is, this is an example. They scold us when we return books late, although we pay the fine. And they never even greet the library users. To be honest, right, even if you drop this and you put a full stop after fine, it will be considered as an elaboration that's quite effective already. And this is the content that was given in the question. Next, insufficient place to sit and read. This is the content given in the question. How does the student elaborate? Our school has about 1,000 students. Because of the lack of space, we have to stand or sit outside the library to read the books and papers. Okay, granted, this one is 2 different sentences for the elaboration. It's okay as well. But let me remind you, just 1 sentence is also fine, right? Then you move on to old furniture. It's the third content point, and we provide our elaboration by saying, we need to deal with the old furniture problem because when the furniture is broken, it's a safety threat to the students. And what I've done for you here is I've highlighted the content words that I asked you to use wisely earlier, right? I've highlighted them for you. Within the same paragraph, you have 3 connectors, not content words, right? My mistake. Within the same same paragraph, you've got 3 connectors that I'm recommending you follow suit as well, right? It helps to give your paragraph a smooth flow. Then from this paragraph, you move on to your next paragraph. You start off the next paragraph with another connector, for example, second, like that. All right. So what about formal letters? You have a look at it. I've created one example for you. Dear sir, the title of my formal letter is Complaint about the poor quality of food and service. All right. In the introduction, in the opening, I have given the situation. So I want to express my dissatisfaction about the food and service at your restaurant. Then you give a small description of what happened that day, very small, just a very brief run through, not the details. The details are for the later paragraph. So here, on behalf of my family, I want to raise several points regarding this matter. Then, what happened that day? Family had dinner to celebrate their parents' anniversary. We wanted to have a good time. We expected they would have a good time. But unfortunately, something bad happened. What are the bad things that happened? That's what you start when you actually go into paragraph 2. Have a look. Connector. Content. Elaboration. Waiters treated us rudely. We had to wait for 40 minutes before we could order any food. And while taking orders, the waiter rolled eyes at my mother who wanted to have a cup of tea without sugar. Yeah, it's kind of long, this elaboration. You can actually shorten it if you want. You could just use the waiter rolled eyes when my mom ordered tea without sugar. Yeah, that's fine. It's an elaboration that will already work and give you the amount that you need. Besides, the poorly cooked food, this is the next point, the next content point, was also unsatisfactory. Then you're starting to explain. We were surprised to find out that the roast chicken and fish were actually not fully cooked. This is the explanation. Why do you think it's unsatisfactory? You explain why. Because the food was a little bit raw. Okay, so the elaboration is there. Next one, right? The third connector with the third content point. No action was taken when we brought up the problem to the waiter. And then you elaborate it with being ignored is actually very bad. It felt as bad as being served poor food, right? So this is an example of, once again, how the paragraph can connect smoothly the 3 points together with their elaborations. Informal letter, similarly, right? Now in this case, I think for some reason I've forgotten to highlight the connectors, but I can show you still. So this is the address and the date, as I mentioned earlier, right? These are parts of the format, right? Then you address your friend, dear Jane. Thank you for your letter received this weekend. Now, this is the part where you bring in some kind of common ground. You bring in some kind of shared experience between you and Jane, right? Mom and dad have written to me. They are actually very proud that you have shown your interest in improving how you handle your money. I hope that the suggestions I share with you in this letter, they're helpful to you as you try to find ways to spend wisely, right? So that's the opening, the introduction of your letter. Then you come into the second paragraph. Content 1. Record your expenses, right? That's content number 1. And then you move on to elaborate on it by saying that recording is an effective way to control how you spend your money, right? Then after that, planning expenses at the beginning of the month. This is the second content point. Elaborate by saying that when you plan your expenses, you can actually budget the specific items that you're going to buy, right? And then finally, you mentioned that you need to prioritize what you need to buy urgently versus not urgently. Elaborate. This can help you to evaluate whether you want to purchase something that's very important or not important. All right, so this is just an example of how the second paragraph, once again, has used the 3 points. Okay, so where are the connectors? This is the connector, right? The second connector is the word also, and the third connector is the word another, the phrase another way. An article. I've done the same thing. I've given you an introduction that you can look at. I have actually written about the situation of stress. So the seriousness of stress on students, it's clear when we look at the news reports in mainstream media and social media, right? So that means you're actually specifying the situation. Then you go on, guys. I'm a student and I know it's not an exaggeration, right? It's not fake to say that many of my friends are under pressure right now. And I'm writing this article, remember the purpose of writing, right? So I'm writing this article to suggest certain ways how we can cope with stress as students, right? So the purpose of writing has been stated in the introduction, just as I showed you in the format documents earlier. Now, here, I have highlighted the connector first. Students, especially teenagers, can benefit from regular exercise. Okay, so this is the content, and then you move on with the elaboration. And you can see that the elaboration actually two examples: a brisk walk in the park or a session of a tennis game. Now, these are just two examples of regular exercise. Then, connector, the next point provided by the question is that we can relax the body muscles through exercise. Then you elaborate by saying that when the muscles are exercised, it actually brings relaxation. Okay, after the exercise, the muscles have been tensed and they're able to relax at a later point. This helps to bring calm to your stress. And I should have highlighted this as well. There's one more way that exercise can help, and this is also provided by the question. The content point given on the question paper, boosting endorphin levels in the brain. And this is actually a chemical way that your body produces a feel-good feeling or a feel-good reaction, right? And this reduces your stress. So you can see, once again, 3 content points with their elaborations. And I hope you see that elaborations do not have to be long, right? One more is the talk or the speech. Now this involves, once again, as I said, greeting the audience first in sequence of who is the most senior. Okay, so you have Puan Akila, who is the principal. Then you have the teachers, the senior assistants, the friends. Then you introduce yourself, right? I'm Lionel, I'm Lola, and I am, what's my position? Then remember I mentioned just now, you should thank them for the opportunity, right? So you thank them for the opportunity of letting you talk about the environment. And now you state your purpose. Today, I would like to talk about what are the activities that can be carried out to show our love for the environment, right? So again, connector number 1 is here together with the content from the points in the question, first one, plus elaboration. The second content is presented after the second connector, then the elaboration. The third connector, the content, and the elaboration. So I don't know if you're observing this, guys. The paragraph isn't really a long paragraph. It may look large here because it is screenshotted and I've expanded my writing here for you all to see. But it's actually not a long paragraph. And this brings me to my point that specifies directed writing. In other words, section A of paper 1 you actually shouldn't aim to produce long answers. Remember, the long answer is produced in the 1 hour continuous writing essay, the one that we're going to discuss tomorrow. But this, right, directed writing should be kept short and is perfectly okay actually. It's actually encouraged if your paragraphs are as short as the one you're looking at right now. Okay? Right. Now what I'm going to do is, before going on to our final 2 slides, I want to bring you on a small little challenge, right? And I hope that you benefit from it. Just give me a while. Right. There's a mini task I would like to try with you. Right? And it's going to be a sentence building task. So this is a paragraph that I've written for you. Just one paragraph. Now bear in mind, this is me helping you with your writing a little bit, helping you to elaborate sometimes. And sometimes we are stuck not knowing how to elaborate. And when we are elaborating, we find that all our elaborations sound the same. So I'm going to give you one kind of function today. The function is actually making suggestions. Very often in paper 1, section A, even in paper 1, section B, we have questions that ask for ways to solve a problem, suggestions how to improve on an issue, right? So what this is going to do is this is going to help you guys to look at the word should, because this is the most common way of making a suggestion, right? And as you read this text, it's a well-written text. It's a well-written paragraph about how family needs communication in order to be a strongly bonded family. But every sentence in this paragraph, if you look at it, it starts or it contains the word should. So let's glance through it for a while. The most important thing that the family needs is communication. Members in a family should, that's your first one, constantly interact with one another, because it's not only through interaction that a group of people can reach a positive level of communication, right? Then you move on. Because communication is crucial, all family members should devote some time to one another. Now, once again, guys, bear in mind, the way that this paragraph is written is certainly not going to be the way you write your directed writing paragraphs, right? What I'll do later is show you how I'm going to separate all these sentences apart from each other, and then we are going to work on them one by one. That's where you're going to train your writing a little bit, right? So let's continue. Work should not be an excuse for parents to neglect their children. That's the third should. The fourth should. Similarly, children should not use their studies or extracurricular activities as a reason to neglect their parents. Fifth one, should realize that in a family, each person is part of a larger group. Sixth, should therefore play a part in taking care of the group. Don't just take care of themselves. And then it goes on to the sixth one, should be able to share. And the seventh one, should seek our family to share the joy as well. Guys, there's nothing wrong with the grammar or the spelling or the punctuation, but this is an extremely redundant paragraph. What's redundant? It's a paragraph that shows the student has not put in enough effort to vary the sentence structure, by allowing different vocabulary to be used, right? So if you find yourself in a situation where you're suggesting solution or making suggestions and you keep saying should, maybe it's time to reconsider other ways of doing it. So what to do? This is what we're going to do. All those sentences earlier, right? We're going to try rewriting them. These are all sentences that were taken from the paragraph earlier. But what's going to happen is you're going to find a way to say should without saying should. Now I want you to replace should with ought to. Right? And that's question 1. How do we do that? Thankfully, ought to is used in a very similar way to the word should. Right? So the sentence structure in question 1 doesn't really change much. What I'll do is I'll just delete this and I'll replace it with this. So as I said, thankfully, ought to and should have very similar grammatical functions. So they are used like this. And the sentence structure doesn't change much, but at least you have found a different way of expressing a suggestion. That's number 1. Okay, not too difficult, right? Try number 2. It becomes a little harder. Now it requires the sentence structure to change. Right? And they want this. So how it changes is the front part of the sentence is going to sound very similar to the original one. Right? So it's going to look like this. Now, this is where you bring in the phrase. Okay, so what's happening here is, right, guys, you have brought in a phrase that is taking over the function of should. You don't have to use should anymore already. So you brought in another way of saying should, in other words. So it is necessary for you bring in the subject. Right, so it's necessary for all family members. Now, as I said, the sentence structure has been changed a little bit, which means now you're going to have to introduce another word here too. Then bring back the idea. So in this case, this has been the phrase that we have chosen. And you can rest assured, the sentence up here and the sentence down here have very similar meaning. They don't change much in their meaning, but the examiner is going to value your effort at finding a different way to say should. But are those the only two methods? There's a lot more. Let's look at number 3. Number 3, we want to use the phrase it is vital that. And we want to replace, of course, the word should. So how? This is kind of similar to the one you did earlier, right? But in this case, you bring it to the front. Okay. Then work is your subject, right? It is vital that work. Now, remember, we do not want the word should. So you bring the word in, not directly in. There you go. That's another way to say should, and it's our third way today. Right? So there's a very high likelihood that you're going to have questions in your SPM, right? That will require you to make suggestions, either in continuous writing or directed writing. And these are some ways that you can help yourself. Next one, number 4, using the word should. We don't want that anymore, but we are now using, instead of the word vital or the word important, we use the word imperative. Imperative has a very similar meaning to vital or important. Okay, so you start off with the word similarly, and the similarly you can see is a connecting word. It's a connector. So start it off this way. That. Right? What happens? As I mentioned just now, bring in the subject, children. But you don't want the should there. Drop the should. Straight away, bring in not. And all the way to the end, it's the same. So you notice that the sentence structure may not change a lot. It's just a very minor change, but I can assure you the word that you've used or the phrase that you've used to replace the should is going to be appreciated. Not just by examiners, but by any kind of reader. It shows that your writing has breadth. Your writing has, you have an evolved way of writing that includes different styles of saying the same thing. Right? Next one. You have the word should. Again, we are not aiming for that. We're aiming for this. So we're going to take this and put it in the front. Yeah? That's it. Then you bring in is. Because of the what in front, right? What they need is, then of course you have to use to realize. Yeah? And it goes on until the end. There's your new should. All right, guys, we've got another 3 more. We're going now to use the phrase would do well to, and we want that to replace should. So, very similar to ought to earlier. Remember question 1, we had ought to. See? Yeah. This one actually functions in the pretty much the same way. So you're just going to take this would do well to, and it's going to fill the position of should, really. Right? So let me show you how. I'm going to copy paste this so that we can save some time, yeah? Right? And here, okay, now there's a small little issue here, guys. Would do well to is fine. We've done well already, okay? We've used a good phrase. But because of this particular connector, right? It's okay to use the word therefore after the word should, because should is just one word. But in the second sentence I've written, right, would do well to therefore. This is now an awkward grammatical structure already. So this is not how we're going to do it. We're going to take out therefore. Where are we going to place it? You have a few options. You can place it in front. You can place it here. I would rather, and it would function most smoothly if you place it here. All right. Onwards, number 7. No should. We want advisable. Okay. So for some questions like number 1 and number 6 earlier, is you just take the word ought to, you take the phrase ought to, or you take the phrase would do well to, you just replace. But in this case, it's not that easy anymore. Advisable doesn't just replace the word should. So do what? You bring it in to the front. Okay, when we face difficulties, now this is where it comes in. Right? When we face difficulties, it is advisable. Okay, this is where you have to add this back in. Right? And that's one more way of saying should. And the final one is very similar to the previous. Okay, it is advisable, and you can also say it's a good idea. Very similar in the way that we use. Let's go with the top. This follows the same, nothing changes here. Give me a second. Okay. Now, right, for us. Okay. So something needs to change again. In the same way, when we are jubilant, as in when we are happy, it's a good idea for us to also, right? So just observe the way the words require different changes in the sentences, in the structure. Right, now let me show you what we've just done. We've taken a paragraph that I would say has just really got not much life. It has been a very boringly written paragraph. But we've taken it, deconstructed it, and found 8 new ways to say the same thing. Right? Now this is just one example of how sentence construction with different vocabulary helps you to vary your writing, to bring a better quality to your writing. Okay, tomorrow when we meet, if you're attending tomorrow's session, we're actually going to do a few more exercises like this. But today's is on making suggestions, right? Tomorrow we'll be on, we'll do one short exercise on discussing causes for a problem, discussing effects and impacts of a problem, right? And also, if we have time, we'll go into making predictions. Now, these are all very crucial elements of any kind of writing, directed writing or continuous writing. So today, we have done one task, which is going to help us to make suggestions in the future, right? Now, let's move on to the last few slides that I have for today before I open up a question and answer session. How do you produce a strong answer? What to do as a student entering the exam hall, filled with stress, probably didn't sleep very well at night. Now, number one, a lot of us go into the exam hall looking at the examiner, the unknown examiner. We don't know who he's going or she's going to be. But we go into the exam hall viewing the examiner as some kind of examining monster, some kind of very strict person who's going to be looking down their noses at your writing. I want you to do this. Start with this. You need to view the examiner as a human being because that is exactly what they are. The examiner is a reader. View the examiner as a reader, merely a reader. Forget the fact that there's a difference in age. Forget the fact that they're wearing thicker glasses than you. Forget the fact that the examiner has been trained in a certain way. That's all true, but right now, your writing is appealing to the examiner. You're the writer and she or he is the reader. That's what they are. And as a reader, trust me, that examiner is going to be interested to know what you have to share. Not really interested to see how many mistakes you're making. Not really interested to pick the red pen and go and circle everything that you've done wrong. It's part of their job. Yeah, fine. But at the base of everything, the examiner is an interested person in what you have to write, what you have to share. And number two, your target is not to impress the examiner. You're not actually running a race, you know, guys. And it's not a competition for you to say that I have the best, most bombastic language. So take it out of your mind. Don't go into the exam hall thinking I have to impress him or her. I have to show off my writing skills. You know what? Forget about impressing. Forget about showing off. What do I want you to remember then? What do I want you to keep in your minds? Your target is to go in there and just write something that is clear. And it has to be well organized, well arranged. The points have to flow smoothly to the other points. You have to go in there writing something which is direct and straightforward, especially for section A in paper 1, directed writing. You've got to be clear, you have to be arranged, your points have to be arranged in good order, and your ideas have to be direct and straightforward. Why? No, not to impress the examiner. Why? Not to get an A+. Fine if it happens. You know, we love that. But why? The real why is to allow the examiner to see what you're saying in the clearest way, in the most easily understood way. That's what you want. You're communicating with. So as I put at the bottom there in the bracket, you don't have bombastic words. If you've got them, use them. Good, I'm happy for you. But if you don't have them, I've seen students, and it breaks my heart, memorizing from the internet, writing words down on a list on their hands, trying to memorize, fancy, bombastic, very powerful words to use, or phrases to use, or idioms. If it doesn't come naturally to you, yeah, guys, if it's not something that you naturally use, I'm going to tell you, forget that. You're not just going to get an A because you have a few very powerful words in an essay or in a directed writing piece. They will help, but if you use them in a way that's not natural, if you use them with poor grammar and suddenly there's a very powerful word, it cancels each other out. Nothing will actually come of it. So I don't want you to stress yourself memorizing very difficult terms and phrases to use. You've got enough of memorizing taking place for your other courses, right? Your business courses, your pure science courses. For English, go in there and communicate. So once again, be clear, be well organized, and be straightforward. If you have some difficult words that you can use, some words that you're excited to use, go ahead and use them. But for those of you who don't have those words, you don't really know any very difficult words that you're going to put in, don't panic. You're still going to be okay. Now, coming back down to the actual questions themselves. Remember, directed writing, there are points given to guide you, right? Don't miss out any points. You want to score well. You want to score well. You provide all points from the question. Give me a minute, yeah. So, whatever the question gives you as points, use them all. Okay, second one, as I kind of trained you a little bit with just now, use sentence structures that differ, varying sentence structures. Sometimes shorter sentences, longer, active ones, passive ones, right? Next, part of your grammar is your tenses, right? Generally try to keep your tenses consistent. If you're using the simple past tense, then you're going to be using the past tense to explain a story, or to relate a story, or to relate something in a report. If it's the future, then generally it should relate to the future. You mix your tenses up too much. Sometimes it's possible and it's necessary. But if you mix them up too much, the chances are, again, remember the human being, the examiner, you're just going to confuse her or him. You don't want to do that. The format is important. Yes, use the correct format. But just in case in the exam hall you forget the format, do not panic. Why? Marks for the format, by comparison, right, they are minimal. So even if you've forgotten the format, don't forget your content is important. Your language is important. So don't panic when the format is out of your mind and you go like, how am I going to handle this? Oh my gosh. You can have an OMG moment, but let the moment pass and then focus on communicating the content with clear, well organized, and easy to understand language. Next one, the second last bullet point, make sure you use connectors wisely, like I said. The connectors that you're using will help the reader to see where you're starting, where you're moving, where you're going on and ending, right? The connectors are because the points are also closely presented, right? Especially in section A, directed writing, yeah. Because the points are also close, there are 12 points, in a short essay. The connectors are the ones that are going to help to divide between one point and another. Otherwise, it becomes actually quite messy. Last point, do not overwrite. Do not write too much. Do not write too many elaborations. This answers your question earlier, right? One of you who asked. You don't over elaborate because that's going to cause you to spend a lot of time on section A. You can't do that because section B is still within continuous writing, 1 hour to be spent on that section. So one sentence of elaboration is fine, or one line or 2 lines of elaboration, they are fine. Don't overdo it. Okay, so at this point, I will wish you all the best for directed writing. Section A of paper 1 in your SPM in February. Okay, I would also like to thank you for being very attentive to all my slides and my Microsoft Word documents. Now I will open this up for Q&A, right? So just give me a moment as I call the questions out. Right. Thank you, Magdalene, for asking our first question. Magdalene wants to know if she has taken the content point from the question, but the elaboration is wrong. Will you still get your marks? Right? Now, let me answer this in a way that's probably going to make you feel positive, right, Magdalene, and all of you actually. When you've taken the point from the question For example, the question says, you went for a picnic and, okay, one of the points given is learned the value of teamwork, full stop. Okay, so I write this down. During the picnic, we were able to learn the value of teamwork, full stop. So I have the content point given in the question, yes, but the elaboration is waiting to happen, right? So now I elaborate this way. We learned the value of teamwork. Okay. Teamwork is a method of cooking sardines. All right, Magdalene, I'm just trying to give you something to illustrate an answer that is totally wrong, the elaboration that's totally wrong. Teamwork is defined as a method of cooking sardines. The examiner is going to look at your elaboration, and your elaboration has been totally meaningless, unfortunately. But you will still get your mark for the content. In other words, there will be, for example, half mark for the content, another half mark waiting for the elaboration. You will lose the half mark for the elaboration. The half mark that is there for you because you wrote the content, we learned the value of teamwork. That half mark is yours already. Okay. Now, having said that, Magdalene, it's actually kind of hard to really provide an elaboration that's wrong, because honestly, the examiners are going to, very often, they're going to be able to relate to your elaboration. And your elaboration is going to somehow, logically, you're going to connect it to the point as well, right? So it's not going to be easy to provide a totally wrong elaboration, It's like, for me, so it was really hard. I had to just come up with something totally out of the question, which is like sardines. Yeah, it's quite a humorous answer, but that's a totally wrong elaboration. But an example, through the session, we learned the value of teamwork. Full stop. Teamwork is a skill that is necessary when we take our jobs in the future. Okay. A student might say, hey, that really doesn't really sound like a good elaboration because the future taking jobs is way too far. Right now, we are still students. I can tell you that elaboration is not considered wrong. It will actually be totally accepted because it shows your ability to anticipate a long-term effect. All right. So thank you, Magdalene, again for your question. Okay, we have another one. This is the one I was speaking about earlier, right? It's from Sui Qian, I think. Sui Qian wants to know, is it okay to write only one sentence elaborating each point? Sui Qian, all of you guys, it's totally okay to do that. Right? Totally okay to write just one sentence of elaboration. It's not too short. Remember, yeah? Otherwise, there's a danger that you'll be overwriting, Right? Okay. We're moving on to Yixing's question. Any similar phrases to the phrase, this is because? Right? Now, I'm actually hoping you come tomorrow, Yixing, for the talk, because this is exactly what I was going to do tomorrow. Similar phrases like just now, should, right? You should do this. I gave you similar, alternatives. Because it's actually a case of talking about cause and effect. Something happens as a result. There are different ways of saying this is because. I'll be going into the details tomorrow. But for now, very briefly to help you with this is because. Okay, I'll give you an example. Students often arrive late for school, full stop. This is because they switch their alarm clocks off and go back to sleep. This is because has been used. Now, Yixing wants a different way of saying this is because. What is possible is, once again, students often arrive late for school. Switching their alarm clocks off and going back to sleep often causes this to happen. So I have actually reversed the sequence, Yixing, if you're looking at it. Instead of saying this is because they switch off the alarm clocks and go back to sleep, I say switching the alarm clocks off and returning to sleep causes this to happen. This is one way that you can say this is because. Now, other ways of saying it in shorter form will be consequently, as a result. Okay. You can also say this causes something to happen, right? But yeah, as I said, I will go into a lot more detail on this tomorrow, right? Tomorrow afternoon session. Okay. Okay, this is a very good question from Yu Hao, right? Ling Yu Hao. Yu Hao says that sometimes if he has when he looks at the points given in directed writing, the question paper provides points, right? If the points are provided, but we don't understand what the point means, can we just ignore the point and replace it with another point of our own? Yu Hao, don't do that. Whatever point is given in the question, even if you don't really understand it, you are required to use that point. Especially when the question tells you use all points given. Very rarely the question says use 6 out of the 12 points. I don't think it's ever happened, but most of the time it's going to be use all points given, and this is an instruction that you have to follow. So handle it in a way that I have recommended. Place the point on your answer sheet, and right next to the point, elaborate now. When you say you don't understand a point, right, it probably means that your elaboration is not going to be very clear. But it's better than not elaborating at all. And it's better than bringing in a totally new point and missing out the original point. Listen, Yu Hao, new points are good, You can add in new ideas of your own, not a problem. But if you add in a new idea of your own, hoping that it will replace another idea which you delete, there's a problem there, right? So don't do that. You put down the point, write it out in a complete sentence. That means your point is there. You've already earned your half mark now. And from there, if you can't elaborate, okay, maybe provide a brief example of it, right? Okay. Let me give you an example, yeah? Students arriving late for school. Okay. Bullet point from the question. Reasons why students arrive late, bullet points, yeah? Tardy attitude, T-A-R-D-Y, tardy attitude. Next point, not interested in studies, whatever. Not interested in studies is fine. You can understand and you can work with that. But the problem is tardy attitude. You're a bit lost, wondering how. Okay, what we're going to do is, we know that tardy attitude is placed directly under the heading of reasons why they come late to school. So I'm going to take the smart way out. Although I don't really understand tardy, by the way, which means you have an attitude of you have a kind of behavior that doesn't pay attention to being punctual. You're late, right? You're careless about timing. Anyway, I don't understand tardy, right? So in my answer, I will write, a reason why students arrive late at school is because of their tardy attitude. You know what? I have my half mark already. And then elaborate a little bit. This attitude is something that should be changed from a young age. If not, it will affect their future, or it will affect their ability to be successful in future. It will affect their ability to be successful in school. See, it's a smart thing to do. I don't really understand, but I've managed to go around it. Okay, is it possible to get perfect marks in writing? Michael Nin. It's a very difficult question to answer. It really depends on grammar is a complicated thing, Michael, and vocabulary is another very complicated thing. So grammar and vocabulary make up language. If you ask me if it's possible, Michael, to get full marks for content, 12 marks out of 12, or 15 marks out of 15, I'll say it's totally possible. People do it all the time. But where people falter is usually language, because vocabulary that's been used may not be perfect for a particular situation, or the style of sentences. Like just now, for example, if you keep saying should, everything is fine. The grammar is actually okay, but the style of writing is lacking. the vocabulary hasn't been good enough. So there will be a lack of marks in terms of language. So I don't know, it's not possible to end up getting, I wouldn't say it's impossible, but it's difficult to score a perfect score for language. All right, okay. Now we have a couple more minutes. Let's see what we have. All right, Yvonne, there's a good question from you. If the content has got two sections, you know, the points given in the question, sometimes the points given in the question, they split into two, you know, like problems, ... Then they give you like 4 points for problems. Then solutions, another 4 points for solution. How do you assign it in paragraphs? Right, listen, Yvonne. If that's the case, if they have split it in that kind of way, still, Yvonne, try your best to put 3 content points per paragraph. Okay, try to put it that way. But if it doesn't work out, for example, let's say they give you 5 problems and after that another 5 solutions. Okay, so in a case like this, you've got 1 paragraph with got 3 content points for problems, and then you have another paragraph with only 2. That's fine. Let it be. Okay. The 3 points per paragraph is not a rule, it's a guide that you should try to achieve. But if you have like maybe 1 more point hanging on or another 2 more points, you can just put them in another paragraph. But don't mix problems and solutions in 1 paragraph. Right? Have them separately. So what you may end up doing is you may have 3 paragraphs for problems. If they have a lot of problems, maybe you have 3 paragraphs for problems, and then maybe the solutions, they just give you 3. Then 1 paragraph for solutions. Or if it's really 5 problems and 5 solutions, that means there's only 10 content points, you know. Sorry, 10 points given in the question, you know. You have to come up with 2 points of your own. The question would definitely ask you, come up with another 2 solutions of your own. All right, so that means in this example, you have 5 problems and 5 plus 2, 7 solutions, you know. So what you're going to do is, I will still say 3 points in 1 paragraph, another 2 points for problems in 1 paragraph. That means 2 paragraphs containing problems. Solutions, you've got 7, you know. So 3 solutions in 1 paragraph, another 4 can go into another paragraph. So in total, you have 2 paragraphs for problems, 2 paragraphs for solutions. Yes. Michael wants to ask also whether he can add famous quotes in section A. You can do that, Michael, but make sure that you remember the quote correctly and make sure the quote is presented in good grammar, because otherwise it will add to your grammar error, right? So, and make sure that when you try to memorize these quotes, it doesn't stress you out too much trying to memorize. Okay, it can help, but it's not compulsory. Okay, I think I have answered pretty much everything. Oh, Michael wants to know if section A actually has a word limit. There isn't a word limit, Michael, but a good guide would be to look at section B. Section B is estimated at around 350 words. So section A can actually end up being around 250 to around 300. That's not a limit. It's my personal guide to helping you make sure that it's not too long. Around 250 is actually okay already. It's a healthy number of words, right? Okay, that's my answer to Michael's question. Okay, Kwan Wai has asked a question that quite a lot of students also ask. Do we still say in the pink of hell? Okay, what we do is we sometimes like to memorize phrases and use them, and they become very, very common, and they become cliches, if you've heard that word. They are phrases that are just used by everyone sometimes, and they become boring. Okay, in the pink of hell is a phrase that is very old-fashioned, and some people call it boring. If you use it in an essay, it's not wrong. It's okay. But the problem with these phrases is because they have been used for so long. In the pink of health is a very old phrase. it has been considered redundant in a sense, that means right now people have modified it, or it has evolved, it has changed, and we no longer say in the pink of health, we actually just say in the pink. That's it. So if you're writing to your cousin and saying, "Dear Grace, I hope you're well." Honestly, that's a good sentence. "Dear Grace, I hope you're healthy." That's fine. "Dear Grace, I hope you're in the pink of health." That's a problem, because of health there is now being used in a way that is not correct according to how the phrase evolved. So if you say, "Dear Grace, I hope you are in the pink," full stop, that is correct. So as I said, these phrases, when you memorize them, it brings you back down to what I think was asked earlier about using quotes. You have to make sure you use it correctly, and use it properly as the phrase or the quote has evolved. So to answer your question, Conway, in the pink of health, don't do that. If you want, say in the pink. That's all. I believe I've answered questions as much as I could. Sorry to those that have asked and I couldn't quite address them. I'm looking forward to seeing you tomorrow for the continuous writing section. But I've had a really good time today talking to all of you, sharing this. I hope you've had a wonderful time as well. More important than anything else, I hope that it's been a good learning experience. And I hope that you will be encouraged to go forward for the next 2 months, get some writing practice done, and be satisfied with your answers in section A, paper 1. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lionel. Okay. Okay, now we come to the end of the sessions, but this is the part 1 only. We still got the part 2 at tomorrow, same as the 2 p.m. So just don't forget for the part 2, just punctually to stay with us on tomorrow 2 p.m. And for tomorrow morning session, we still got the others. Before you all leave for the Zoom, just remember that to the chat box, we have the evaluation form for you to fill up. So you can just fill up the survey link. Then just provide us your feedback. And now allow me to share the screens for you. Okay. So for tomorrow morning, is the next sessions, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. is the MX. So if you happen to have your friends or you are actually registered for the subject, you can just punctually to stay with us tomorrow 9 a.m. And tomorrow the second session is in English too. Okay. If you have any other further inquiry you would like to contact us, you can just through our Facebook channel, Utah for You, or our WhatsApp. Even if you have a WeChat, you can contact us through the WeChat. By the traditional way, definitely is the email. Okay. So if you have anything else you need to speak with us, we have a live chat. You can go to a study website as shown in the slide, study.utah.edu.my. So you can just have a little chat with us. Yeah, by the way, to remind that for today's lessons, we are going to upload the recorded versions to our Facebook channel, the Utah for You, and our YouTube later soon. So you can just keep stay with us and see you again tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.